What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Forgotten Jesus podcast with Andrew Bolton. Today we have our guests, Robbie Gallaty and Candy Gallaty. The crew dared me to say that.
Yeah, and you're the main star of the show.
I am
We're so glad you're here.
Today, Pastor, we're talking about the number 8.
You're doing so good. You don't even have our timer going. You're doing so. Like, see, you were so excited to get started and say that line.
I was.
We're talking about the number 8. No. Do you know what the number 8 stands for?
Over completion.
Yes, too much.
Too much.
No, I don't know. Okay, we're talking about genealogy and gematria in the lineage of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. And so let's kind of dive right into it. And we're going to ask the question, Andrew, why start a book? Why start the New Testament, in a sense, with a genealogy? Why would you do that? If you're reading the Bible for the first time and you're coming to here, why do you do that?
Well, if I'm reading the Bible for the first time, and I get to genealogy, I skip over it, and I start reading everything else. If I'm honest with you.
How many listeners do the same? Probably many, huh? Candy?
I don't now, but I used to.
Right. Well, I would think if it's starting off with the genealogy, somebody's trying to prove something.
Yes, they're trying to prove something. Okay. We begin with 3 words. The genealogy, or 3 names. The genealogy of Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, Mashiach.
Okay.
The genealogy of David, and the genealogy of David, and Avraham, or Abraham, Matthew begins his book with an Easter egg. Did you know this?
I did not.
Okay,
I didn't think Easter had happened yet.
Don't tell us. Let us guess.
Okay, figure it out. There are 3 names, and I want you to take the first letter of each of the names. Okay, so Jesus, let's say Mashiach, Messiah, M, Messiah. David starts with D, Dalet. And Abraham starts with A, Alpha. If you reverse the names in order they're supposed to come, Abraham, David, Messiah, you get the name Adam.
Wow.
Adam.
We're supposed to be guessing here.
Adam.
Yeah, I didn't think you could guess that.
Adam.
You got it. Bingo.
I got it.
Adam. Adam is the word for man.
Right.
The first man. And so in a sense, yes, he's the son of David, son of Abraham, but he's also the son of man.
Okay, so is that a coincidence that, like, hey, if you read it this way and reverse it, it says this? Like, that sounds like playing a record backwards and it says,
this ain't no record.
Hell Satan or something.
Yeah, no. No, it actually says Adam, not Satan, by the way.
I'm not saying the Bible says that.
No, I think it's a nod to Adam. I do think. I don't think it's by. Now you could read this, say, it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
But you could also read the whole genealogy and say it's a coincidence that it's 14, 3 sets of 14, which are divisible by 7, and Jesus is the 7th. So at this point, we're beyond coincidence with God, right? Like everything in the Bible,
orchestrated,
every word,
intentional.
Yeah, we used to learn in seminary that not only are the words inspired or the encounters inspired, but the actual letters are inspired, right? Wow. In the Bible. Every letter is inspired by God, meaning there's no coincidences in the Bible. And yet, again, in your life, there are no coincidences in your life.
Right. Whew.
God works all things, good and bad, for his good and our good and his glory. So aren't you glad that we don't believe in open theism, which is a technical term that means God is sitting next to you as you're in the driver's seat and he's looking out the window of the future and learning things in real time like you are.
Right.
Like when hurricane, this is what open theism, I don't believe in this, and
then he wouldn't be God.
It's heresy. Right, it ceases to be God, but there's some...
Who believes in that?
Well, there's some scholars out there who would call themselves Christians who would say they believe in open theism. And the idea is that God's learning just like you. When Hurricane Katrina took out our house, that was a surprise to God. Yeah. Where'd that come from? But he's God, so he enacts and makes changes. That's not how God works.
Yeah.
And that's not a God we want to serve. Right? Aren't you glad that God is in control of everything? I tell people this about the Bible. God actually wrote the Bible starting with the last line of Revelation. He actually wrote the book backward, in a sense. He started with the end, wrote it backward, and then let it go in real time.
It's like one of those cars you pull back.
You pull it back and you let it go in real time. Meaning he not only knows the end because he created the end. Right. So, so the genealogy of Matthew. Why is Matthew writing this genealogy? There are 2 reasons. Okay. One is he is going to prove and validate Mary, that she is the mother of Jesus, virgin birth, but also Mary had a question mark over her life, most of her life in Nazareth, because of the betrothal process with Joseph. I believe there were a lot of questions about Mary. Even the Pharisees at one time called Jesus a mamzer, which would be
an outcast.
Yeah, it's a curse word in a sense. I don't want to say it, but I don't want to say it, but
we can bleep that out.
It's a B word, but it's a word that means he is born out of wedlock and he
illegitimately.
is illegitimate. It's a better word. Thank you.
What word?
Yeah, starts with a B.
Starts with a B.
I'm just joking.
It ends with a D.
He is something, him, trying to get us to curse on our, we lose all our viewership.
You already said mamzer.
Yeah, mamzer is an outcast, an illegitimate child. The Pharisees actually say that to him.
Right.
You're an illegitimate child. Wow. Okay, so that's what the townspeople believed about Mary. And what he's doing first is he's showing that this is not uncommon. This is the character of God. Mm-hmm. But the second reason he gives the genealogy, and this is the part, now let me just prepare you. What I'm going to teach you today or next week, because we never know how.
We know how this goes.
We know how this goes. But you will hear it in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to make a statement to you about this genealogy you may never have heard before, but I'm going to back it up with scripture. Now, do I know this is 100% what it said? No, this is a perspective.
Right.
But I'm going to give you a perspective about the genealogy you may have never heard, and that is this. Matthew is trying to get the elephant in the room identified, because the elephant in the room is this. Everybody in Nazareth, okay, you got to remember, people in Jerusalem, Nazareth, Israel, they were big on genealogy, okay? Ancestry.com has nothing on the Jewish people knowing their lineage, right? They all knew their lineage. Why? Why did they have to know their lineage?
I think everything mattered. Everything hinged on the lineage. Like the lineage of where the Messiah comes from matters just as much as anything the Messiah does.
But bigger than the Messiah. Why would you need to know you're of the tribe of Benjamin? Why would you need to know you're of the
land allotment?
Land allotment.
Okay.
Promises, curses, and messiahship.
And purpose. Like there were certain tribes that did certain things.
Yeah. Levites were priests.
Yeah. They didn't have any land.
They didn't have any land. So the gift for them was the temple.
Right.
Not all Levites are priests, but all priests are Levites.
Right.
Right. But we learned that before. Okay. So they had to know the lineage. Now, the problem is when the Babylonian captivity happened, a lot of the records were destroyed or lost. When the Maccabean revolt happened in the 170s, 68, they lost the lineage in reports again. But there was one community that was militant with keeping records of their past. One small town that was overlooked and looked over. So small it wasn't even a blip on the maps in the early days. Do you know what town that was?
It was a town or a tribe?
It was a town.
Nazareth.
Bingo.
Ding, ding, ding.
Bingo, bango.
He's on it today. I'm just telling you.
He's been on it last
What are
few
you
weeks.
drinking over there?
This is Starbucks Cinnamon Dolce with sweet and cream silk.
Really?
Yeah,
Where's mine at?
Robert?
Okay. No, Robert, we don't drink Starbucks here. We drink Legacy coffee.
Oh, there you go.
Down below at the Legacy Coffee Shop. Okay, but this is the thing. The idea is Nazareth kept copious records. Why? Because the town of Nazareth, I don't know if you know, is connected to an Old Testament prophecy from the book of Jeremiah, which he said that the lineage or the Messiah will come through the shoot of who? Do you remember this?
Jesse?
Through the shoot of who? Jesse. Okay. I think it's Jeremiah. It may be Isaiah. I think
Jeremiah 22.
Is it Jeremiah 22? I'm sorry. It's Isaiah 11. It's either Jeremiah or Isaiah. They both prophets, but a little different. Isaiah 11:1. It says, "A shoot will come from the stump of Jesse." Okay. The shoot there is the Hebrew word netzer, shoot. Mm-hmm. And that's where you get the root Netzareth or Nazareth. Ooh. So the people of Nazareth knew and believed that the Messiah would come from them because they lived in some affectionately called Shoot Town.
Right.
Branchville. That's where they lived. Okay. So everybody in Nazareth had records diligently kept through the years. Yeah. So they knew that Andrew's father's father is Simeon. They knew that Candy's family goes back to Judah, okay? Robbie's goes to Benjamin. They knew that, okay? So what the elephant in the room surrounding Joseph was, Joseph has one of the requirements of messiahship, but he is disqualified from being the father of the Messiah on another side because of one word from a man named Jeconiah. So we're going to get to that second, but I'm going to show you that the reason Matthew has the genealogy there is not to prove that Joseph's lineage goes back to King David and through all the way back to Abraham. Yeah. It's to prove that we know that Joseph cannot be the father of Jesus because he is disqualified in his lineage. We'll get to that later. Let's get to the first one, the easier. I got Candy hanging on the edge of her seat.
Processing right now.
Processing, yes.
Okay. Scoot the seat up, you won't fall off.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, let's go to Matthew. We're going to read the genealogy. We're not going to read all of them, but I want you to just notice right out the gate. We'll start in verse 2, Candy. So we'll read verses 2 through 6, and we're going to pick up a few of them right away.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, verse 2. Abraham fathered Isaac. Isaac fathered Jacob. Jacob fathered Judah and his brothers. Judah fathered Perez and Zerah by Tamar.
Okay, that's the first one, Tamar. So circle that if you're following along. If you're driving, no, but following along, circle Tamar. Keep going.
Okay. Perez, hold on.
Fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Aram.
Aram fathered Abinadab. Abinadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz.
I like to say salmon, but I play it very salmon. Go ahead. Decide salmon. Salmon fathered
Boaz.
Number 2. That's the second one.
Boaz.
Yep.
By Rahab.
Rahab. Number 2, Rahab, sorry. Boaz.
Boaz fathered Obed by Ruth. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered King David.
Okay, so now we have 3. So we have Tamar. Mm-hmm. We have Rahab. We have Ruth. And let's read one more. We'll pick them all up. Look at verse 6. Jesse fathered David.
Yes, and David fathered Solomon by Uriah's wife.
By Uriah's wife, who we know as who?
Bathsheba.
Okay, so in the genealogy of Jesus, we have... Oh, go ahead.
Just to say, what's interesting is
okay.
Bathsheba is almost always considered Uriah's wife.
Okay. Why is that?
I don't know. It's very interesting to me.
Mm.
It's too far for us to go down, but I just think it's interesting that most places that she's listed as Uriah's wife.
And not by name?
Yeah, correct. Now, sometimes she is, but a lot of times when she's being described, she's described as Uriah's wife, which she was Uriah's wife.
Right.
But I mean, we know eventually, she's with David and all that, but she's always referred to as Uriah's wife.
Okay, why?
Yeah. Mm.
Why do you think?
She wasn't David's wife.
Well, because Uriah, the Matthew's trying to teach us something. Yeah. Something about Uriah. Where was Uriah from? What was he a part of? He was Uriah the Hittite. And that's the point Matthew's trying to make. Mm. He's trying to make that Uriah was a Hittite, which is teaching about the culture and context. Okay, but we digress. Okay, that's good. So we have 4 names of 4 women. Why is this odd in a genealogy?
Well, I think typically in a genealogy you have men listed.
Yes. And you would think it makes sense because fathered, right. And so you have the father. But in this case, you have 4 women.
Right.
And these 4 women are not the women you would line up as front of the line, super spiritual, righteous in a sense, perfect past, right?
I mean, they have, interesting situations.
They have checkered past, they have difficult stories, and guess what they all have in common? Not only are they 4 women, number 2, 3 of them, what? 3 of the women are actually involved in sexual immorality.
Right. Wow.
And all of them are Gentiles. Why are non-Jewish, sexually perversive or sexually active immorally women engaged or included in the genealogy? Why in the world would you do that? Let's take each of them. Tamar and Rahab were Canaanites. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know that from the text. Ruth was what? A Moabite. And then Uriah, the wife, the husband of Bathsheba, was a Hittite. So you have these 3 non-Jewish connections, okay? Mm-hmm. Then you also have the sexual immorality. Bathsheba is the result of what? She's the victim of rape, albeit done to her, but she's part of an immoral, adulterous situation that was brought upon her. What about Tamar? You remember the story of Tamar? and you go back to Tamar in the beginning, and Tamar was what? Ancestral prostitution or an ancestral relationship. She's not prostitution. She was part of an ancestral relationship with a family member. Rahab was a prostitute, and Ruth was a Moabite. Now,
but we don't know Rahab if she was a prostitute by choice or not choice. So it's important to think about that.
Yeah, and we have two connections to Rahab being this way. We have one in the book of James that says she was a harlot, so we don't know if she was engaged in prostitution by choice. That's a good point, or she was forced in it. But regardless, they have checkered past.
Sure. But don't we all?
Don't we all? I think that's the point. So you're getting at the point.
Skipping ahead.
You're skipping ahead, but that's good. So Ruth was a what? Ruth was a Moabite, and Moabites by nature. We don't know how bad Ruth was or engaged in, but Moabites by nature were engaged in ancestral relationships between Lot and his daughter. Or Moab was, okay? So the idea here is you have all of these women with sexual immorality, some of them, a lot of them out of wedlock. Why do you put that into the genealogy of Jesus?
Well, obviously, you're trying to prove a point. But what point are you trying to prove?
Yes, okay. What is the question mark that, you gotta understand, Mary and Joseph from the beginning, in a small town of Nazareth, probably, you got to put yourself into Nazareth. Let me let you think about Nazareth. Nazareth was such a small town that early maps did not even place it on the entire map. There was no even dot for Nazareth. It was so insignificant. It was a backwoods, podunk, in the middle of the country town that had about, guess how many people they estimate were in Nazareth at the time of Jesus? How many people lived in Nazareth?
A couple hundred.
Okay. I was going to say 1,000.
1,000? That's a good guess. About 200.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
200 to 300. Is that crazy? 200 to 300 people.
Wow.
Everybody knew everybody.
And you got to understand, it was communal.
Okay.
And people were related, and everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
You knew everybody in that town. Because remember, they didn't live in suburbs. They lived in insulas, where if a son gets married, they build onto the house and they move in. So everybody knew everybody, right? So if Andrew and Jenny or Robbie and Candy, all of a sudden they start dating and then they get betrothed. And then all of a sudden we know in the betrothal process, there's no intimacy until the marriage happens. And Candy comes out or Jenny comes out and she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And you go ask her, hey, how are you pregnant? She said, I know this sounds crazy, but it was God. It was God.
Yeah.
Right.
You're like, come on, man. Really?
Like we know how these things
Come on. And you got to remember, Mary, we believe, was 14 or 15, which was not uncommon back then. Maybe 16, but I think she's probably 14 or 15. Yeah. So this is a young girl saying, hey, no, you have to believe me. An angel visited me. I was impregnated by the angel. Joseph had nothing to do with it. Then you got Joseph's whole perspective, and he's trying to believe his wife. And so you have this question mark from the beginning of sexual immorality on the couple that is going to raise Jesus.
Wow.
Think about this.
Which hangs over them forever.
It's a dark cloud, I think, over their life, even to the end. And when Jesus is approached by the Pharisees, they know all about it. You're an illegitimate child. We know your story.
Yeah.
Don't come here and say an angel impregnated you. Come on, man. You got to come with something better. And so you have this question mark, which is why I think leaving Nazareth, going to Egypt, and coming back a few years later was probably good, because the dust settled and time was their friend. Okay. Right. So you have, why would Matthew put these four ladies in? Matthew is showing right out the gate, this is the character of our God. We serve a God that takes people who are outcast, people who have checkered past, people who are overlooked, people who have past that are despicable and despised with guilt and shame. And man, I think all three of us at the table resonate with this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You think about this. When I first started sharing my testimony, I remember the first time I've ever shared it. I got invited to go preach. It was the first sermon really I'd ever delivered. I got invited to go preach at the Brantley Center, which was the homeless shelter in New Orleans downtown.
Right.
And the guy said, "Hey, would you come share your testimony? I think you would connect with the people." And so I go. My parents decide to come because they can't believe that their son here, who not long ago was on drugs and alcohol, is, quote, now called to be a preacher, whatever that means. And they're going to come listen. And my parents don't know any better. So mom and dad show up dressed in Sunday attire.
To the homeless shelter.
To the homeless shelter. Dad's got his button-down shirt, his khaki pants, his Florsheim's. Mom's dressed up, with a nice shirt and pants. And so they're in there, and we're at the homeless shelter. There's about 75 people show up for this thing. I was pretty overwhelmed, you can imagine. I never preached in my life before. But I knew God had called me to share the word. And I made a deal with the Lord. If you save me, I'll share my testimony. So I get up and I share my testimony for the first time. Not like I shared today, but, former drug addict, alcoholic, result of a wreck and addiction, $200 a day heroin and cocaine addiction, 2 rehabs, multiple times falling. And by God's grace, radically saved November 12, 2002, just 2 months ago.
Wow.
And that's all I said was, if you want to know the same Jesus that I know, I'm going to ask you to stand right. I didn't know how to give an invitation. I just knew to stand. And 7 guys, Andrew, that day stood up. You could sense the Lord's presence in a palpable way that night. And they came in and hugged me, embraced me, and said, man, if God can save you from that, he can save. Okay, so we leave. We go to we're heading to the parking lot. And my dad, who doesn't know anything about church or ministry, pulls me aside and he says, son, that was awesome. I really, and they're not even believers at this point, right? My dad pulls me aside and he says, son, that is a great testimony you shared, whatever your story, but I would ask you not to share that ever again.
Oh, really?
So he told me.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't know how, testimony.
Right.
And he was just saying, that was your past.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't need to share that. That's behind you. Move on. Plow a new direction.
Yeah.
And I didn't know much in the ministry at that point, but I said to my dad, Dad, I love you. I appreciate that. I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
I believe God brought me through that testing, through that suffering, through that trial to give me a testimony. And that's what he does, right? If you're listening, God takes us through the mess of life. And on the other side, we have a message to share.
Right.
God brings us through excruciating testing because he tests those he loves. In fact, if you're listening, if he wasn't testing you or bringing you to a place of strength and growth, he wouldn't love you. He tests those he loves, right? And I would say, remember, testing in the Bible is never to break you down. It's always to build you up.
Right.
God only tests a person whom he loves, not to destroy them, but to build them up. He knows what's inside of them already. He wants the person to know.
Right.
And so I told my dad, I love you, but I think I'm going to share that. And so now here we are 21 years later and still sharing the testimony, and God has used that. And I'm not saying if you're new to the Lord or just came to Christ, you have to go out and put on a billboard what you're saved from. But I think you shouldn't be ashamed of where God has brought you from to where you are today. And here's simply how you share a testimony. This is who I was before Christ.
Right.
This is what happened when I met Christ. Don't forget this. And here's what's happened since I've come to Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, that is so encouraging. How encouraging is it that God from the very beginning was painting this picture of Jesus even has this bloodline of mistakes? Because I remember when I first came to Christ, when God started calling me into ministry, which I believe we're all called to ministry, not just vocational ministry, but wherever you live your life. The first thought that kept creeping in was, who are you? Who are you to do this? Who are you to talk to people about this? But God was very intentional to teach us in that way. Hey, real quick, how many guys stood up?
7.
7.
Wow, I didn't think
How
about
that.
I didn't think
Like
about
it
that.
confirmed completely.
Wow, I've told
your
that
call to
story for
ministry.
years and never thought
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
That's
you're
really
welcome.
Cool.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Well, Pastor, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to get into the next episode next week. Hey, if you are enjoying the podcast, be sure to leave a review. Shout out to whoever left us a 1-star review. I don't know who you are, but I doubt you listen to the podcast. You just don't like us. So,
that's right.
but if you can leave us a 5-star review, that
need
would be
reviews,
awesome.
yeah.
I need it to go from 4.9 back to 5.
Ooh.
So I'd appreciate that. And if any of this content is helpful, be sure to share it with a friend. And don't forget, we now have discussion guides that go along with each episode. So if you want to continue the conversation with your friends, all you got to do is click on the show notes and you'll find the discussion guides there. Well, Pastor, thank you so much. Candy, thank you. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.